So we have been talking about the banquet for the last several weeks. We've been inviting you to register. You can't anymore. It's too late. It's too late. It's cut off.
By the time this video goes up, I think it's banquet week.
It's banquet week. And the reality is, if you're like, Sarah, this is the first podcast I've ever listened to, and I'm so excited to come, and now I'm so sad because I can't come. I could try to squeeze you in, but
you might sit on the floor.
You might be eating pizza with the staff in the lobby.
Like, just manage your expectations.
Yes. So you can text me if you have my cell phone number, which I'm not giving out on a podcast, or you can email podcast@promiseoflifenetwork.org, and you can ask to see if there's a space. But the reality is, at this point,
probably not. So sorry.
But we would ask for your prayers. You are also welcome to donate. You can go to promiseoflifenetwork.org/donate if you want to be part of like the banquet vibe. And the banquet vibe.
I don't know what the vibe is yet, but like it's a vibe.
And if you want to just learn more about the organization in general, I'd be happy to grab coffee with you, or Mikayla could grab coffee with you, and we'll just talk about Promise of Life. Yeah. I'll even recreate it. One time I had someone who did not make the banquet. I think she got sick or something. Like, she was 100% coming and she couldn't make it. And so I just recreated the entire banquet for her over coffee.
So if that's what you want, you should have coffee with Sarah. And if you would just like a very succinct summary of what goes down at the banquet, you can have coffee with me. Pick your poison.
Do you want unbridled enthusiasm and lengthy conversation, or do you want like a nutshell?
Yeah.
Mikayla will give you a nutshell.
Enthusiastically. But it will be the nutshell.
But like, I'm not unbridled enthusiasm, or do
probably
you bridle,
not.
do you bridle your enthusiasm?
I have to, because otherwise I'd get kicked out of a coffee shop. Like,
as you're like on the table.
I have like way too much. It's not even energy. I don't know what it is. It's not energy. There's too much something. Personality, maybe. I don't know.
I think you have just the right amount of personality.
I appreciate it.
You're welcome. All right, so this week we are talking about single people.
Yeah.
All the single ladies. Put your I shouldn't put my hands up. Put your hands up. There you go.
Yeah, I hope our video doesn't get taken down for you. Sorry, Beyonce.
I don't think anyone would listen to that and think that,
like, oh, is that Beyonce's music?
Beyonce? It's literally not the person anyone is thinking of.
That's fair.
So, single people matter.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I think as Christians and pro-lifers, we tend to focus a lot on get married and have babies, and that's good.
Yeah.
It is good to get married and have babies. I got married and had babies. Like a crap ton.
Like a lot of babies.
A lot of babies.
But not for the both of us.
No. You can still have babies.
Okay.
But there is a tremendous amount of space and a tremendous calling on the lives of single people. And we think that as Christians and pro-lifers, we often overlook that. So today's episode is dedicated to the single folk.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times the focus on single people is, oh, well, when are you going to get married? And
it's like fixing their singleness.
Yes. Like you are inherently broken because you're not married. So how can we make this happen? And the reality is the Bible tells us, and this will be our Jesus moment, that some people are called to singleness.
Yeah.
And that's not always apparent, right? Because some people are called to singleness for a season. Well, I mean, everyone is called to it for a season.
Yeah.
Like, ain't nobody getting married in the womb. But some people are called to singleness for life.
Yeah.
And as Christians, we need to make space for single folks, and single folks need to know like how they can make a difference in the pro-life world and in the Christian walk in general.
Yeah, and I think that's really important. One, I'm a single person, so if you haven't figured it out, single. But sometimes when I talk with other pro-life people, they tend to be married because I'm not old, but I am up there as far as singleness goes in Christian circles. Like I've graduated undergrad from a Christian college and still didn't get married. Like I mean,
you're not on the show.
My turkey's cooked. You know what I mean? like if I could go to the small Christian college and still come out not married, like it's game over.
I don't think so, but okay, keep going.
My professors would disagree. But so I have a lot of married friends and they have kids and we're in the stage of life where like they're having their children. And And then being like the resident pro-life person in my friend group of married people is really interesting because it's like, well, like, you know, someday you'll get married and have kids. Someday you'll get married and have kids. And like, that's the pinnacle of being pro-life.
Right.
Is like creating life myself.
Exactly.
Which I value. Like, I love babies so much. But also it's really weird to like make that the pinnacle of being pro-life.
Well, and the thing is, you don't have to have children, whether it's because you're single or because you can't have children. Not you, but like people in general can't have children to fulfill like what it means to be a woman or what it means to be a pro-life person.
Right. Or what it means to be a Christian.
So there are lots of Christians who have lots of babies, and that's beautiful. But there's also Christians who don't have babies for whatever reason. Either they're single or they are unable to, or for whatever reason they've chosen not to, and that can be, that's okay. And especially if you're talking about singleness or infertility, that could be God's plan.
Yeah. And so just trying to like navigate that too, because also there are people who recognize single people and like make space for us, but it's a part of other people's space that's just really weird. So for instance, I have had people lump me in with college students. So it's like college students and Mikayla.
That's like eating at the kiddie table.
It's kind of like eating at the kiddie table. And it's really, I love college students. And I teach college students, which makes it even more weird that I get lumped in with the college students because they're like, here's all these college students and here's a literal college professor. Mm-hmm. And like, we're in the same demographic because we're unmarried. And it's like, well,
you probably have more in common with a married person in their 30s than you do with a college student.
Yeah. Yeah. So navigating that within the church is very difficult. But then also like in the pro-life movement, it's kind of very similar.
Unless you're a nun, which is not really an option for you.
No, there's no such thing as reformed nuns. I've looked into it. It's not an option for us, unfortunately. But I really appreciate nuns. Like, I've been helped out by nuns and I love the sisters. Yeah, like, love the sisters, but I myself cannot be a nun.
No, not without some serious theological changes.
Yeah, it was like there was a little bit of a rift between
about 500 years ago.
Yeah, so I'm disqualified from the nunnery, but navigating being single in the pro-life world is also complicated just because, again, either I'm not pro-life enough because I don't have children, which I have been told before, like straight to my face that I'm not pro-life enough. And I'm like, well,
what's the solution exactly?
That's kind of what I'm like. I don't like arranged marriages. I don't know. Like, I don't know what the solution to them was, but I'm like, I don't think the Bible.
Who said that? What's their address? This is the most random thing I've ever
It's
heard.
Like really bizarre that like it's
like, are you just supposed to marry anyone or just supposed to sleep around? Like,
I don't know. Like, what's the solution here? I don't know. And then sometimes people have a hard time taking anything I have to contribute seriously in the pro-life world. I think because I'm unmarried, like, I don't know. That could just be me projecting it. Like, maybe they're not, and I'm feeling self-conscious. Mention that in like a counseling like, I don't know, we'll mention that one.
Jot that one down.
Yeah, I'll jot that one down for later, a different kind of meeting. But there's space for single people, and it's not just, well, you can be pro-life by babysitting.
No, I mean, yes,
totally, but like also
your boss.
Single people aren't just your babysitters,
but they could. No, I'm just kidding.
And they could be, and I very happily babysit people's kids. Mm-hmm. But like also, we have more to contribute than just watching your children while you go off and be the pinnacle of pro-lifeness.
Right. So one thing that's really neat here at the center, we have 4 single ladies on our team. And
oh yeah, I forgot. New hire.
Yeah, new hire.
I'm like, wait.
The very, very likely that all of you will eventually get married. Some of you may not.
Yeah.
Either way, it's fine. But if you were married at this moment with small children, any of you, all of you, you probably would not work here.
No. And at the very least, not in the capacity that I currently do.
Right.
And so singleness is definitely a gift in a lot of areas. And this goes for like the pro-life movement and the church. So as a single person, I am able to do so much in my church that a lot of people could not do. Example, went to Europe for a month on a missions trip. If I had children, they probably would have been upsetty spaghetti if mom just peaced out for a month and went to Northern Ireland.
Yeah, no, my husband would definitely not be thrilled if I just announced that I was going on a mission trip for a month and leaving him with all 6 of our children.
And if I had a husband, he probably would have not been super thrilled about my little like jaunt to Iraq the one year.
Probably not. Like Anthony's actually been like, you can't travel with Mikayla, like anywhere she goes. Well, honestly though, okay, so a couple of years ago when you went to Kenya,
Yeah,
and everything was kind of blowing up internationally with like Ukraine and Russia,
yeah,
and there was also some stuff happening in Africa. Well, there's always stuff happening in Africa.
There's always stuff happening,
but there was stuff happening in Africa, and the board and my husband and I decided together, like, you can't go.
Yeah,
because like, you have 4 children and 2 frozen children. I think I had them at that point.
Yeah, yeah.
And like, you can't. This is not okay.
Yeah,
like you can't put yourself at risk.
It would be irresponsible, and but it wasn't irresponsible for me to go. Because I don't have people depending on me the way that you do.
Yeah, and you traveled with someone whose kids are all grown.
Yeah.
And same thing. She's in the stage of her life where she's like, I can afford, to travel and put I mean, it wasn't a tremendous risk, but take some risk.
Yeah.
And serve the Lord in that way.
Yeah. And so I was able to serve my church in that way because I can participate in missions in a very specific way that most people in my church can't. And then in the pro-life movement, there are things that I can do, resources I have, time that I have, I think more than anything, that a lot of people don't have. Mm-hmm. And so even now, it will have already happened by the time this gets released, but we do have the Pennsylvania March for Life coming up.
Well, let's talk about it in past tense.
Yeah. I was like, so we do have the PA March for Life.
No. I mean, like, let's go back and pretend like it already happened.
It's happened. We went to the PA March for Life, theoretically, and nothing went wrong.
No. Say, like when we went to the PA March for Life.
Like when we went to...
Theoretically. I don't want people to know how far in advance we record these.
What if, though, we didn't get to the March for Life because something has happened?
Then we'll clear it up in editing. Or just don't talk about it.
Anyway, that is an event. That was an event. That I have the freedom to go to as a single person. It would be more complicated, and you're going /went /planning on going, and maybe you don't because you have kids and something happened. I don't know. We should have talked about the actual, like, the National March for Life that we've been to together.
So, for example, when we went to the National March for Life.
Yeah, that was something that it was very easy for me to go to the National March for Life because, like, I don't have a husband whose schedule I have to work around or kids I have to take care of. It's just me and, at the time, my cats, and they were fine.
They don't seem to mind.
They didn't mind at all. I don't even think they realized I was gone.
They were like, well, the food bowl got a little low.
It didn't, because they had an automatic food bowl, and they had, like, an automatic litter box that, like, rotated. So, like, they were totally fine. They literally did not miss me at all.
Sad.
I was also only gone for one night.
Like, no, that's true. Yeah. It was a blitz.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's things that I can't do or be as committed to because I have a bevy of children and a husband, and that's fine because that's what God's called me to do. But there was actually a season before I met Anthony where I was like really praying about like, am I called to singleness? Because I knew that I wanted to do ministry, and I didn't see at the time how like marriage and ministry would work. Yeah. Because I was like, I'm going to get married and I'm going to have like be a stay-at-home mom and I have all these kids to take care of, and like, how am I going to do ministry in that space? And God obviously brought me the right man. Yeah. To like marry and support me in that, and like we work together really well. But that doesn't mean that everyone is called to marriage. And I think that's the biggest lie of the church. I mean, is this idea that marriage is like the goal for every single person. And it's not. And that's okay. Yeah. But I think it can be hard, especially when you're young, when you're in your 20s and 30s, because everyone's like, oh, when are you going to get married? And it's like, maybe I'm not. Yeah. Maybe I'm not called to marriage.
Like, have you talked to a 29-year-old man?
That's true.
It's rough out here.
And it's tough too, I think. And I personally did not experience this, but I know I know many people who have, that with the world of dating apps, there's this idea that there's always someone out there.
No, I truly think that like online dating has destroyed the way that we used to date.
Because you used to meet someone in person, you'd like see them around their friends, and they'd see you around their friends, your friends, or maybe you met them in church, or maybe you know they're each other's families, but there was some like level of familiarity.
Well, it's also like you were basically limited to who lived locally or within reasonable driving distance. And these days, and so it did require, I think, you to make kind of concessions, right? Like you've got this limited pool of people and you're like, okay, like you and I, we have the same values, we have the same beliefs, like core beliefs. Perhaps I'm really into history and you're not, but like that's fine. We can work around that.
Right.
These days, you get to that point. We have the same values, we have the same beliefs, but perhaps you're not as interested in XYZ as I am. So
I'm going to go look for someone who is.
Yeah, because there's plenty of fish in the sea.
You're kind of looking for that perfect person.
Who doesn't exist.
There is no perfect person. And if you found them, you shouldn't marry them because you're not perfect and you're going to screw them up.
Yeah.
And like when Anthony and I got married 400 years ago, there are things that like we're not the same on. Mm-hmm. And those things have actually been really cool because I've learned to like things that I never would have liked, never would have tried without him.
Yeah.
And he's learned to tolerate things that he never would have liked. Because I tried.
That's like the fun part of getting to know someone. Like if I'd be so bored if I married someone who was like really interested in philosophy.
That does sound boring.
Well, also like I'm really interested in philosophy, and I think we would bore each other. Whereas it's like, oh, like you're into something that I've never heard of. Tell me more.
Anthony took me. I'm gonna get this wrong. I think it's called mud bogging. But it's essentially a giant trench filled with mud, like up to your waist if you stood in it, which you can because at the end people race in it, which is wild, and trucks drive through it. And I was like, fun. I was a little bit like,
I drive a Honda Pilot, so I don't know, like.
Well, I mean, you wouldn't know. You wouldn't drive through it. Like these are trucks that are specifically like they're built for.
So you're like monster trucking, essentially,
kind of. And I remember thinking like, this is going to be awful, but like he wanted to go, and so I went. And of course, the boys were thrilled, and it was actually kind of fun.
Yeah, I was like I mean, like that sounds kind of fun. I don't want to be the person driving, but I would ride in a car as a man drove it through a giant mud puddle.
I just watched. We did not participate in the bogging. You just watch other people do it and see like how far they get.
That seems significantly less fun to me. I'm like, all right, like let's go.
Let's get it. Yeah. Another thing that we actually started when we were dating, which I never would have done on my own, is he took me to see a tractor pull.
Oh, those are fun.
I am tractor pull obsessed. Like, he was ready to go home, and I was like, "They're not done."
I'm really competitive, and so like those types of things, like I'm always down for a tractor pull.
Yeah, and I would never.
Yeah,
I would never have been like prior to meeting him. I would never have been like, "I'm going to go to a tractor pull."
Yeah,
and so that can be really cool. But the big thing is, like, we met, and we met like as online dating was taking off.
Yeah.
Like, there were maybe 3 services. Yeah. Like, eHarmony was brand new. And I think Christian Mingle was pretty new.
Yeah.
Like, it was all, like, the kind of OG apps. Because nobody even had smartphones when
we
met.
Yeah.
Like, smartphones were very new. Mm-hmm. And so people were using, like, laptops and computers to access these things. It wasn't like it's on your phone and you're constantly, like, swiping left and right or whatever. And so we met, and, like, one of the first conversations we had was, what's your values?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what do you believe about God? What do you believe about family? Like, do you want kids? What's your theory on, like, one person staying home? Of course, at the time we thought it would be me, but it didn't work out, and that's fine. And so, like, we never would have kept going if we hadn't agreed on those things. Mm-hmm. But also, like, those are the things that make our marriage work.
Right. Because
it's not about, we have all the same likes, and we have all the same hobbies, and we have all the same, interests.
Yeah, it's even like ways of doing things.
Right. It's about having the same basic moral fiber and wanting to work towards the goal of having like a godly family. Mm-hmm. And the rest of it kind of sorts itself out.
Yeah.
But I do think that online dating where you can be on your phone and you can just swipe left, swipe right, swipe up and down. I don't even know how many swipes. I've never been on an online dating platform.
I'm not on online dating.
But I've seen people like they're like sitting in a waiting room and they just swipe through their matches.
Yeah.
And so it can create this idea that there is that perfect person out there. And if you don't find them, you're going to be miserable forever. Mm-hmm. And then it also reinforces the idea in marriage where if you have a difficult time in your marriage, it's because you married the wrong person. Mm-hmm. Instead of saying, no, I married the right person. We're just having a difficult time. We need to get through it.
Yeah. Yep, it's something.
Yeah. So sure. All that to say, like, obviously dating apps can be challenging, but also in this season of singleness, whether you're in your early 20s or your 30s or your 40s or your 50s or more, whether you've been married before or not, God has a plan specifically for single people.
Yeah.
Right? Like, he's not like, oh, this is messed up because you're not married.
Yeah.
And single people have this ability to do things that married people just can't do.
Yeah. And so I would encourage all of my fellow single people.
Oh, single ladies.
Beyonce?
And men.
And men. No, single but like people. Live your life to the fullest now. Live your best life now.
Don't sit around just waiting for the partner.
Well, that's the thing. It's like I have a lot of friends who feel like they are not called to singleness. Now, and I've been told multiple times that if you don't feel like you're called to singleness, maybe you're not called to singleness. Which, who's to say? I'm not sitting around.
I have this crazy belief that God kind of calls you to the obvious things. So if you are single, you are at this moment called to singleness.
Right. So I'm like,
I can't just wake up and be like, I'm not called to be a wife and mother.
Yeah.
Like, no, I obviously am because I have a husband and children.
Right. So, but I have friends who like sit around and their whole life is basically waiting for like that moment to happen where you get married. And that's when their life starts. I'm like, I would be so depressed. Because what happens if you sit around and wait your whole life to get married and you never get married?
Right.
Like, you wasted an entire life.
Or are you potentially going to marry someone who is not good for you?
Yeah.
Who's not a Christian.
Because you just so
doesn't
desperately
share your moral beliefs.
Yeah.
Because you just want to be married.
Also, I feel like the kind of men
who
would be attracted to women who are just sitting around doing literally nothing, waiting to get married, like that doesn't seem like an attractive quality to me.
Well,
but that's
either way.
That's just me.
Not
like
for men either.
Yeah, it was like men who are just sitting around. Like I don't find that attractive to sit around wait for something that might not happen, and you're not doing anything in the meantime. Whereas, like the men who are stepping up and doing things with their time, helping other people, using their time wisely, using their resources wisely, using their finances wisely. Single people can do that. You don't have to be married to serve your church.
Right.
And you don't have to be married to donate financially or to be a good steward of your resources. And to do really cool things. And I think there are a lot of really cool pro-life people who are single. Mm-hmm. And they might go on to get married later, and you see it happen, like their ministry changes. And that's okay, because obviously, like, the Lord called them to something else. But in the meantime, we can serve, and we can do really cool things.
And God is calling you to your current state for this time.
Yeah.
Even if it's not a permanent situation.
Right. no,
even if you think, no, I definitely want to get married. God's put that desire in my heart. I'm going to get married. Okay, but at this moment, you're called to singleness if you are single.
Mm-hmm.
Just like at this moment, I'm called to be a wife and mother.
Mm-hmm.
I can't just be like, no, I'm not called to be a wife and mother.
I'm out.
like that would be very wrong.
Right.
And at the same time, like, until you meet the person you're supposed to marry and you're dating them and you're engaged or whatever, like whenever singleness ends, I guess dating. I don't know. Are you still single if you're dating?
Well, that's what I was about to say, because you did mention 4 single staff members, and I was like, I don't know, like, technically.
I guess I mean not married.
Yeah, I was about to say, like,
married.
Yeah, not married, but like, yeah.
So I guess
I don't know the terminology. Clearly, none of it applies to me. So
I think I would say single means not married. So if you're not married, that means you are currently called to singleness, even if that singleness has an end date, like a wedding, an engagement. And so live out your best, like live out your life, knowing that God has called you to something that you can do, even though you're single. And they're like, what does that look like? Okay, first of all, we talked about like serving in your church.
Mm-hmm.
There are things I can't do as a mom because I have obligations to my husband and my children.
Mm-hmm.
I can't leave work and go hang out with a widow or go hang out with a single mom.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can, but not frequently because like I need to take my kids to their activities. I need to go home and have dinner with my kids. I need to spend time with my husband. Like those are things I have to do to be a good wife and mother.
Mm-hmm.
Those are things that you can do.
Mm-hmm.
And you do.
Yep. I do. I love hanging out with the older people.
Yeah. Another thing that a lot of moms can't do, I'm very blessed that my husband's willing to stay home with our kids. A lot of women don't have that option, is they can't work full time in ministry because they have a husband and they have kids, and ministry is hard.
Mm-hmm.
And so even if you want to work, which a lot of women do, it may not be the time in your life when you can be in full-time Christian ministry.
Right.
Because it's a hard calling.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes a tremendous amount of time and it takes a tremendous amount of energy. And single people have that time and energy to give.
Yeah. And I do think like there's something to be said for I think if the Lord has called you to something, he's going to provide. So I'm not saying that like families can't serve in the ministry, because I was raised by a ministry family. You're raising a ministry family. So like we know that it can happen. But there's definitely, I take up less resources as a person. It's just what it comes down to. So
you
like
eat
I don't,
less than all 6 of my children.
Yeah, probably. Well, yeah, they're all boys, so
Yeah,
definitely.
Definitely. You should see how much you like them.
Yeah, I was like, I like to eat, but like I don't. They could probably out eat me altogether. But like that does mean like I am not supporting a family right now, so I don't have to think about making sure my children can eat, right? Because it's just me, and it's actually relatively cheap for one single person to exist. It doesn't always feel that way sometimes. As we near election season and those kinds of conversations come up, I'm like, wow, inflation is
so bad.
It's so bad. But realistically, like it doesn't take much. And so if you're wise with your resources and you steward your finances in a certain way, I can work here because I don't have however many hundreds of children you have at home to feed their mouths. And obviously you still make it work. And so like the Lord's going to provide if you're called to something, but it does make it way easier to be called to something that does not generate a lot of profit if you're just by yourself.
Right. The other thing, and I realized when you moved into your apartment and you were like, I'm here in my apartment by myself, I like cried a little. I was like, alone? You're alone?
Yeah.
That's amazing. But as married folk, and other single people too, obviously, but like most of the time in the church, the majority of people are going to be married.
Yeah.
And the minority are going to be single, whether they're widowed or divorced or have never married. And as married people, we need to make space for those people in our homes, at our holidays, at our events. And like, not every single person is going to want to spend every holiday with 800 children.
Yeah.
But sometimes, hopefully, when I invite you to do stuff and you come, you're not thinking like, oh dear.
No, it's fun because I don't have kids at home.
Well, I mean, there was the season where Jonah took all his clothes off.
That was weird.
That was a moment. That was like right after you started working here too.
Yeah, like I will never. It's seared into my memory. Him in the wheelbarrow.
You sold her dirt. He tried to sell you dirt.
He tried to sell me dirt. I didn't. At the time, my finances were considerably less than they are now because I had just started here, and I was like, I can't afford to buy your dirt. In fact, I was there to pick up meatballs.
Right. Like I bought you some for my kid.
Yeah, because you had brought me. So like, I wasn't even there to pay for anything, and he was like, we don't have any meatballs, but I'll sell you some dirt. And I was like, first of all, you do have my meatballs. Your mother told me. Second of all, how much does this dirt go for?
And why are you sitting in it naked?
Why are you sitting in a wheelbarrow with nothing but a helmet on? Literally nothing but a helmet on. But I was glad that he was being safe. So
yes,
everything else was at risk, but not his noggin.
Jonah did go through a season where clothing was not his favorite thing.
I think every kid does.
Especially boys.
Yeah.
Especially boys.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he got through that, and he wears his clothes all the time now.
Oh, I'm really proud of him for that. Yes. I should tell him that next time I see him.
They love it when Miss Mikayla comes over.
Well, and I love hanging out with them, and because I don't have kids at home, so it's you know, like just as much as you enjoy like your alone time that you never get. I enjoy like spending time with little kids. Like I got to snuggle with a little boy at church last night. Like he snuggled up next to me because I think he was bored of his dad's sermon, but you know.
Whatever it takes.
Whatever it takes. And so I cherish those kinds of moments. Like, send your kids over to snuggle the single people.
And then there's also you having an opportunity to speak into the lives of, like, teenagers and stuff, because you're, like, the cool single person.
Yeah, I'm, like, the cool,
But you're also, like, an adult. And so we can trust you to, you know, where someone who has little kids at home may not have the time to really bond with and encourage a teenager. You can. Yeah.
And I think relatively their parents are confident that I'm not going to share something weird. Relatively.
Probably not.
Yeah.
Probably not.
Probably not.
Probably not.
There are some, like, I am actually an adult. That does remind me of one time my little church buddy asked me, well, wires got crossed. He thought we were related. And I was like, well, that's actually not.
We're just brothers and sisters.
Not the case. Well, he was like, I don't remember you being in mommy's belly. And I was like, well, there's a lot of things.
Wow, that's a lot.
It really was a lot to unpack. And so I was like, well, first of all, I'm older than you. So if that had been the case, you wouldn't remember it anyway, because I came before you. And he was like, well, how old actually are you? And I was like, well, buddy, I told him how old I was. And he goes, hold up. He goes, how did you get to be an adult without a husband?
Like it just.
Sorry, how are you allowed to be an adult? That's what, how are you allowed to be an adult without a husband? And I was like, well, the Lord has not given me one. So that's just how it shaked out. And that was enough for him. He didn't care. He just kind of went on about his day.
We had a friend. We have a friend, but she was in college, and when Tommy was like 5 or 6. I actually met her through the center. We were still over in the old office, and she volunteered, and we got to know each other, and she became very close with my family through the rest of her college years. Mm-hmm. And she used to come over all the time. But the first time she came over and met the kids was for like a staff picnic. Mm-hmm. And so later my kids were trying, and of course they're like 3 and 5. Yeah. So the you're not getting the whole picture. Yeah. So they kept telling me about the big girl. Oh. And she was blonde. They were clear on that. Okay. But there had been an older girl there, maybe 2 years older than Tommy, and I was like, oh, you mean her? And they're like, no, she was like big. And I'm like, I'm like trying to think like who was there that was like I'm thinking like a teenager. Yeah. Yeah. No. None of them have blonde hair. And I can't figure out who they're talking about. And they're like, like she can drive. And I'm like, oh baby, no, she's not a kid. Like she's a grown up. Like and they're like, no, she's not. And I'm like, no, she is. And they're like, no, she doesn't have any kids. And I'm like, no, she doesn't, but she's also still a grown up. And it really rocked their world. Because I think in their mind at like 5 years old, they were like, well, one day you have a child and now you're a grown up. Yeah. But before that, like they were shocked when they found out she didn't live with her parents. Yeah, they were like, who? Because they asked if we could call her mom and ask if it was okay if she came over, and I was like, no, we can just call her and she can come over. And they were like, she doesn't have to ask her mom, and I'm like, no, and they're like, what? Yeah. I think Johnny's world was really rocked whenever he learned we weren't related. Yeah. And 2, what a shock. And 2, learned that you actually are allowed to be an adult. Without a husband. But like he really was like, who allowed you to be an adult with no husband? I was like, I don't know, man. Like I don't feel like this is how it was supposed to be either, but here we are. Who allowed you? I'm like, God did. Yeah, argue with that, Johnny. And he just went on, like, unfazed him. He just went on and told me about his trip to Chicago. Like he just moved on. He was like, that's enough for me. Yeah, and you know what? I kind of wish it was enough for other people, but like it's not. They're like, so like what fatal flaw do you think you have that has prevented you from getting married? And you're like, well, maybe everybody else has a fatal flaw. Yeah, you're like, raise up some actual men and we'll talk about it. But yeah, that's a different story for a different day. If you're a dude, man up. Man up. No, I'm just kidding. But also that probably applies. Man up. If God has not called you to singleness and you are a man, you should meet a woman who agrees with you theologically and wants to have a family, and you should marry that person and make babies with her. Dating advice with Sarah in that order. In that order. Do not make babies before you're married because I will find you. If you are a man and you are not a believer, you should become a believer. Yeah. So just as kind of a ending note, single people, how can we live faithful Christian lives as pro-life people in singleness? And I think one of the important things is recognizing, one, it's okay to say that it's hard. It is hard. It's difficult. It's not always fun to be single. But there are things that we can do. So one, I think we can glorify God in our singleness by upholding the laws that he has given us. So that means that just because you're single doesn't mean that you can go around and have sex with everybody and do whatever you want. It is actually a very pro-life thing to abstain. So abstinence is really cool. Don't be the kind of person that like wears those Virginity Rocks sweatshirts because it makes me really uncomfortable. That is weird. I really hate them. It's a really weird trend. It's weird, and I just, we're not talking about virginity here. We're just talking about sexual abstinence. Well, and chastity, it's just weird. Chastity is not virginity. Yeah, it's just, it can be. Yeah, but there's a lot more to chastity. I hate those sweatshirts. So if you own a Virginity Rock sweatshirt, please dispose of it immediately. Use it as a cleaning rag. Yeah, because it is not the cool statement you think it is. Like, it's just weird.
way to make something weird. But serve your church. Get involved in your church. If you're not, ask your church how you can be involved.
And don't wait until you get married and think, oh, I have to be married before I can be of service.
No.
Just do it now.
In fact, like, you can be probably way more of service now than you'll be able to when you're married. So take advantage of that. And then also get involved in the pro-life movement. There are really cool things happening. Really cool things that I think take special kinds of people to accomplish, and single people can be one of those groups.
Absolutely.
Just like, I am able to travel. I can go to places, and I can also speak out without having to fear that the consequences are going to harm my family, because I don't have an immediate family.
Right.
And so I can go speak out at the March for Life and not have to worry about if someone's going to find out where my kids go to school, which is unfortunately the reality of a lot of pro-life people.
To become the reality. Yeah,
is like, scary. You have to think about the implications for your family, but not me, because I don't have a husband or children. So I can just kind of get away with it.
You're footloose and fancy free.
Footloose and fancy free.
So our Jesus moment is 1 Corinthians 7, verse 7. And this is Paul speaking, as is most of the New Testament, frankly.
Yeah.
I wish that all were as I myself am. Why does Paul always phrase things in the most awkward way possible?
He was an unmarried man. And I feel like we do have to take that into account when we read his writings. Like, recognize that he was living the bachelor life.
Okay. But each has his own gift from God, one of one kind and one of another. To the unmarried and the widows, I say that it is good for them to remain single, as I am. But if they cannot exercise self-control, they should marry, for it is better to marry than to burn with passion. To the married, I give this charge, not I, but the Lord. The wife should not separate from her husband. If she does, she should remain unmarried, or else be reconciled to her husband, and the husband should not divorce his wife. To the rest, if you're not single or married, what's the rest? How have I never noticed this before?
Yeah, I was like, wait, hold on.
Oh, here we go. He's explaining it. Okay, that's why. That's why I
Okay.
never noticed it before, because it's not as scary as it sounds. All right, to the rest, I say, I, not the Lord. Wait. Okay. So at one point he's saying it's not I, but the Lord. Now he's saying I, not the Lord.
Okay.
But isn't it?
Okay, so
It's
he's
inspired.
basically, well, yeah.
Okay, anyway, it's inspired. We're good.
One is a direct reference to like a commandment, I think, and this
No.
is Paul being like, and also like
And
just
also-
a helpful piece of advice from yours
Okay.
truly.
Got it. That if any brother has a wife who is an unbeliever and she consents to live with him, he should not divorce her. If any woman has a husband who is an unbeliever and he consents to live with her, she should not divorce him. For the unbelieving husband is made holy. Okay, so then it goes on to talk about unbelieving partners and things like that. Basically, if you're married, stay married. If you're single, maybe God's calling you to stay single. And I would say stay single until God makes it clear that that's not your calling.
Yeah.
That's our Bible moment.
And then
That's
there's
our Jesus
the weird third group of people.
and there's the others. But we're not worried about them. Maybe that's a different podcast. All right. So thank you so much for tuning in. Let us know in the comments how you can serve the Lord as a single people, or how single people have been part of your life as a married couple or a couple with,
It
single
better not
mom.
just be babysitting. But we do
Could
love,
be
it could be. I just feel like that's like the default, like, what could you do as a single woman in the church? Babysit. And you're like,
So I feel
I
like
have
by
so
saying-
many cool talents, and I don't know that like keeping children alive, well, that's technically my job, but like also in a very indirect way.
Also, although I will say that my kids have recently discovered that if you put Mentos, they have learned that if you put Mentos in a bottle of Diet Coke, it will explode.
Oh, that's really fun.
So if you want to babysit, they're down for
Heck
that.
yeah.
So there you go. There could be fun babysitting. Anyway, have a great week. Like and subscribe. Sorry about the banquet, but if you've already registered, we'll see you there.